As Pervez, I work for the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery at the World Bank. I'm based in DC, and I will be presenting to you the session on monitoring and evaluation of reconstruction and recovery programs. I've been asked why this is important. It's for very obvious reasons. In post-disaster situations, normally there is not much time to focus on issues such as governance and accountability, whether aid is actually rightfully reaching out to the beneficiaries or not, whether such disasters afford the opportunity of results-based performance monitoring, whether we do really care about longer-term outcomes in disaster situation. So, from my experience of disasters, and I've worked in various countries, there is a growing sense of accountability among practitioners, among policymakers, among implementers on reconstruction projects, that this is an area that has been often neglected. And what I've seen is that in some of the recent catastrophes, like the 2005 earthquake, for example, where I was very deeply involved, we had at least a couple of good examples where such systems were put in place. There was a housing reporting, monitoring, and evaluation system that helped us do intermediate outcome-based monitoring. That really helped us, establish whether the developmental impact was being created, and if not being created, what course corrections could be taken. Just to give you an example of what a good monitoring and evaluation system in the context of reconstruction can do. Similarly, we had a good governance and accountability mechanism in the form of a grievance redressal system, and I would have loved to show it to you on the computer screen, but that may not be possible. And what once again this system did was and there were like 600,000 beneficiaries in the housing program, and there were probably around 300,000 or 400,000 complaints. So it was not easy to manage those complaints, and so there were efforts from the government, and they arose out of just the gigantic needs of the disaster to do something more systematic about how to reach out to beneficiaries, how to first get a handle of complaints. So our session will basically be talking about three things. It would be talking about, in a sense, walking the talk on results in terms of disasters, looking at performance systems, on evaluating, monitoring reconstruction outcomes as it happens. Then there would be a session on some innovative tools on social impact monitoring, followed by a session on the role of governance and public accountability in disasters. And I'll just stop there and request you to kindly participate in the session. The way we are doing it is that we have already set up a virtual working group, which is across regions, and we would very much like to reach out to all those who would be interested in the subject to be part of the virtual working group even before the conference. Key questions on the session. Sessions really to incite your interest and really to engage you in this discussion. The first question is something that I've already asked, but I'll just repeat in other words. Is the post-disaster scenario essentially one that is conducive for very detailed results-based monitoring? Is that the right venue for doing that, or should we look for simpler systems that may not be as data-intensive but more realistic and can provide real-time information to implementers and for others to whom such data would matter? That's question number one. Question number two would be, do you think post-disaster aid has equitably reaches disaster victims? You could look at various post-disaster examples to get your answer, but what is the increased what and if there is an increased room and role for governance and public accountability systems to play a role in fostering such distributive impact and such transparency of aid distribution? And the third question is, how do we monitor longer-term social impacts? These are grassroots impacts on communities which may not necessarily be covered by any macro level tools. So what is the extent to which we would is there value in monitoring these impacts? How do we monitor these impacts? What level do we go to? And what systems do we put in place to help alleviate some of the negative impacts of disasters?